What's up, everybody? Season 1 continues with, you know what, let's just skip the intro. You know it's good, I know it's good, Season 1 is good. And so is Dot and Bubble. With every week that passes, I enjoy this new era of Doctor Who more and more. And I think this episode marks a turning point. If you haven't been following along with the channel, infamously going into RTD2, this new era of the show, I was apprehensive. Genuinely, I was concerned. A lot of the creative decisions just weren't gelling with me. It all looked a bit clumsy. And when Destination Skaro, and more specifically the Star Beast, came out, I wouldn't call myself a hater, but also I wasn't like a massive fan. Now, over the next few days after that original special came out, I did warm to the Star Beast, with me enjoying it more and more on subsequent rewatches, and I did love Wild Blue Yonder and The Giggle. But even after all that, and especially after the ending to The Giggle, which, I mean, I've gone over that a million times before, I was a little worried going into the new season. I mean, I had faith. I know Rusty Davies knows what he's doing, but I mean this honestly, this was probably the least looking forward to a new Doctor Who series I have ever been. And can you blame me? The 60th specials, while not being bad by any means, left a little to be desired. 6 out of 8 episodes were written by Rusty Davies and only 1 was written by a new writer. The schedule had been changed to this utterly miserable midnight release that has done nothing but make my Friday nights hell and turn the ratings discussion somehow more unbearable. And yet, with all that said, I will happily say that I was wrong. I'll put my hands up, people, because not only do I think that this season has been great, I think this season, Series 14 of Doctor Who, is up there as one of, if not the best, series of the modern era. It's in the top 2. And guys, I don't know if it's number 2. The consistency and quality has been shocking, frankly. This episode, Dot and Bubble, the one that just passed us by, was the one I was worried about the most. It looked bland, uninspired, and not fully thought out. Little did I know it would be the exact opposite of all those things. But now that I've watched it, now that I've watched that episode and watched it over a handful more times, as I always do with the latest Doctor Who episodes, yeah, I can safely say the series is fire. Next week looks good. We know the finale is going to be good. Unless they release unwatchable garbage 3 times in a row, this is an all-timer right here. Its main competition for me is Series 5. In my opinion, this is pretty much a perfect series and has multiple episodes in it which I would consider best of the best S-tier material. Series 5's worst, in quotation marks, episode is probably The Beast Below, and that episode has incredible world building, consistent and hard-hitting character and emotional moments, a great ending, teaser, and pretty much is great in every way that matters. So that's saying something. So right now it's between Series 5 and Series 14 for me, on which is the best. I think, just where I'm at right now, I think Series 5 just about etches over it because it has the increased episode count, which gives it more time to develop its incredible cast of characters and allows for more interesting plot points, i.e. Rory dying. Spoilers. But still, to be up there in the first place is a definite achievement. And I think this episode in general is an achievement. I was stunned by the end of it. Truly jaw-dropping stuff. And just the more I think about it, the more I think about the season in general, the more I like it. It's just good, man. There is so much here. Like every story of Series 14 so far, there is more than just one idea at play here. But unlike episodes like The Star Beast and to a certain extent The Giggle, this episode cuts the fat and streamlines it to the point where it doesn't feel overstuffed, not even slightly. Dot and Bubble is given ample time to breathe, and part of that is its entire commitment to its established concept. It's all from Lindy's perspective and it doesn't jump around, it doesn't take shortcuts. Similarly to how in Boom, it stayed committed to the Doctor being on the landmine from the word go. When an episode does something like this, the audience can really sink their teeth into it and get genuinely invested, which I think is good because Dot and Bubble has a surprising amount to say. Something which I haven't seen anyone point out, in my opinion, are the clear parallels at the ending to A, colonialism like from the British Empire, B, American pioneers, and C, those losers in current day who say that they're gonna go off grid but clearly wouldn't last a day. And that's just from what I noticed. Also, just to get off topic for a second, did anyone else notice, or was it just me? I don't even know if this is true or not. I'm sure you guys will all let me know. Do you see this? Is this just me? This brown sticky gas? I called it fart gas. Is that toxic? If it is toxic, does that mean that the wild woods themselves are toxic? I assumed that as yes, But I don't know if that's actually canon. Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, Dot and Bubble isn't just talking about one issue. I've seen some arguments about whether the people in Find Time are racist or elitist or classist, and the truth is, it's all of it. The episode is a commentary on many things, similarly to how Space Babies isn't only about abortion. That's just a small part of the episode and the many meanings that episode is trying to convey, because it's a piece of detailed, incredibly well written and well conceived sci-fi storytelling with dozens of ideas baked into it. Find Time is a commentary on iPad kids, on social media, on echo chambers, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on FaceTime, get it? It's a commentary on the current government, on spring break, on the failures of the older generation, on augmented reality, artificial intelligence, on boy bands. I could go on. To book the story down to one message is really doing it a disservice, in my opinion. But with that being said, that core idea of racism is so present in the story, core to the story, and handled in such a mature way, I just have to say hats off. I've got to give my respects. What an episode, man. I am personally of the camp that sees the actions of the Find Time residents at the end and throughout of being almost entirely racially motivated. I think that they are completely blatantly racist. Now, to me, that was something I thought was impossible to miss, but I understand everyone's perspectives when approaching media are different to mine. I've learned long ago that sometimes I will walk out of a film or program with an entirely different reading to everyone else, and that doesn't necessarily make me right or them wrong or anything. I think it's the amount of useful evidence that you can provide to back up your point that does that. But with that said, I mean, the looks they were given, the words they were saying, to me, it just seems obvious it was racism. Which leads me on to my next point, plausible deniability. This is the idea in Dot and Bubble that I walked away thinking about the most, and I think I know why. Throughout the episode, there are many hints to Lindy's true nature, most of which aren't very hidden. She instantly blocks the Doctor, but doesn't to Ruby. She calls the Doctor's name stupid. She ignores everything he says unless Ruby also says it. In the elevator, she ignores the Doctor's questions and instead tries to call the police. In retrospect, probably to report him, she says he's not as stupid as he looks, didn't recognize him because they all look the same, says that he's going to be so disciplined, calls the Doctor horrible to Ricky, averts her eyes when seeing him in person for the first time and intentionally tries to avoid him, flinches when he speaks to her, and then, well, from then on it's not really hints, is it? The racial implications of the words voodoo and contaminated are clear as day, as is Lindy singling out of the Doctor. But why did it take us up to this point to realize? It didn't take long for us to realize that she was an annoying person, or even a bad person, but the reason we didn't pin her down as a racist is because she had plausible deniability. Every single one of those situations could be brushed off as something different. Yeah, they're a bit sketchy, yeah, they're recontextualized now that we know the ending, but at the time, we just assumed that they didn't mean anything by it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. In fact, I think it's good to not instantly assume the worst of people, to hope, and to only write people off when you have actual concrete evidence to do so. Otherwise you come off as paranoid and unlikable. But I think the reason this plausible deniability stuck out to me so much is because within the fandom, something we've been dealing with for a very long time. Now, before we go on, as you can probably tell, I like the new season of Doctor Who. I like Doctor Who in general, but this new stuff I think is pretty good. But I don't think anyone is wrong for thinking the opposite, for thinking it isn't, or that they don't like it. I'm saying this now as a disclaimer because I'm going to be making a few generalizations and I want it to be known, clear as day, set in stone. I do not believe for even a single second that there aren't valid criticisms of this episode or this era that can be made easily. I do not think disliking this episode or disliking this era makes you in any way racist, sexist, or bigoted. It is just an opinion on a TV show, on an episode of a TV show. But with that said, in this fandom there is a problem with people who are straight up bigoted and hide behind that veil. They hide behind other people's genuine criticisms of an episode whilst saying things that, while not being explicitly discriminatory, very much are, and are intended to be, but they have just enough plausible deniability to get away with it. To say, oh no, I wasn't saying that, I was just saying insert something they very obviously weren't saying. And it's annoying because it's a lie, but you can't prove it's a lie. I'm sure many of you in the audience know exactly what I mean. And just again to reiterate, I am not conflating the genuine valid criticisms of this episode and this new era with bigotry in any way. I'm not saying you're a bigot if you don't like it. I'm not even implying that in any way. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. And so with that said, let's look at this comment. Now, thankfully, this comment is not from any of my videos. You want to see this shit in my comment sections? As we all know, everyone here are the GOATs. Best community of all time. And to prove it, let's look and see what people have to say who aren't from this community. Here it is. Now, let's dissect this. The point that this person is making is that the episode is morally wrong for painting out the residents of Fine Time as incorrect. So we're off to a pretty bad start, but note the use of the word refugee. Now, plausible deniability, technically, yes, if those people did go with the Doctor in the TARDIS, they would become refugees. But let's be real with ourselves, we're all adults, we all know what he's saying. This person is clearly using the term to evoke a different connotation. A connotation in this person's circles, which is likely to be negative. I wonder why. Of course, the idea in and of itself is stupid because the Doctor would be taking them to a nicer, less dangerous world where they would be able to, in quotes, rebuild their society from the ashes of old. But let's just ignore that and move on to the second part of the comment where they say, chocolate nurse what? The joke here, of course, being that Ncuti Gatwa is not Doctor Who and is instead Nurse What? And the chocolate is there to show that he's black. It's just a joke, bro. It's just a joke, bro. It's just a joke, bro. But no, we're still going. It doesn't even end there. He might be offended by that. Again, the Doctor in the episode isn't offended, so. Seeing as his family ran from it and Sponge, you know what? I think you guys get it. I don't want to read it no more. This is a reference to the fact that Ncuti Gatwa's family escaped from Rwanda in the Rwandan genocide in 1994 and settled in Scotland. The final part of this comment is implying that he's a lazy, good-for-nothing who doesn't work and steals money, aka a racist stereotype. This comment is racist. Every part of it oozes the exact same bigotry that Dot and Bubble warns us about. It, in my opinion, sums up a lot of the negativity I have seen, in fact, the vast majority of the negativity that I have seen against this new series of Doctor Who. A terrible, bad faith interpretation of events that involves smugly and incorrectly reading against the text, coupled with a heavy dosing of plausible deniability. You could use that as a tagline. You can put that on countless of these awful Doctor Who hate videos that somehow just keep popping up. Who watches this shit? But keep in mind, these videos genuinely aren't made by fans. These aren't made by people who watch the show. They self-admittedly aren't fans. Which is why I think it is very important to also, in these conversations, step away from all that and make sure to also talk about real people's criticisms of the episode. Remember, I made that distinction earlier. I've talked about this, now let's talk about this. As I said, I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush. It would be dishonest of me and wrong to imply that even for a single second, people who haven't connected with the new Doctor Who are all like that guy. And also, I straight up don't think it. While the majority of people I've seen online have very much enjoyed this past episode, I have seen some criticisms and some criticisms of past episodes. And so I think it is important, also just for the funsies, for me to explain why I think the way I do and why I like the series so much. Why do I like this? Why do I like this episode? Let's start with the slugs. The man-traps are a quintessential Doctor Who villain. From concept to execution, these guys are awful and disgusting and scary. And funny. In a weird, very weird way. Hell, I would not like to see one of these things face to face, but it is kind of cute. Maybe it's because I like snails. Except when they eat all my plants. But I think it's been a real long time since we've had an actual Doctor Who monster in the show. The Bogeyman was good, I suppose he counts. But I remember back in the days, they would have guidebooks or sections in Doctor Who magazine where they would go through the old monsters. And of course, for me, back then, I hadn't seen everything yet. A lot of my knowledge of Doctor Who monsters and stories came from these, or the novelizations. And what I was instantly brought back to upon seeing these monsters was that same feeling that I used to have. And I think that's a sign of a great monster. And I'm sure many children across the nation were running away terrified, which is a definite W. Lindy Pepperbean is a monstrous character, but one totally understandable. I have known people like this in real life and hated them. It is commendable to Russell T Davies, as one of the oldest writers to ever write for Doctor Who, that he still has his finger so firmly on the pulse of the culture. Not everyone can do that. It is impressive. Ricky September. This fucking guy, man. What a hero. And he's dead. He's brought in specifically to make the audience think that he's a trick. I certainly didn't trust this asshole. And then you realize that he's not a trick. She's a trick. There's always a twist. There's always a twist, etc, etc. And of course, that ending. Never before in Doctor Who has there been such a mature, well-handling of racism. I fear with an issue this complex, important, and monumental, it is right to not throw it around willy-nilly. Funny word. I think in previous episodes it has maybe been a bit frivolous, a bit, we solved racism, guys.
Kids, don't be racist.
Cut! Here, not only do I think it is incredibly realistic, but it is moving, poignant. It is just great sci-fi. Similarly to how I believe Rose Noble's transgenderism is the key theme that the story of the Star Beast revolves around, and how it all links back to that, this bigotry that the Doctor faces in Dot and Bubble is the starting point of the story. It all stretches out from here. This is the key theme, and I think if one is to try and actually tackle these issues in a meaningful way, one must do that. It can't be tacked on at the end. It has to be integral to the themes of the work, because otherwise it'll just come off as half-baked. Of course, Ncuti Gatwa's performance here is incredible. As always, he proves why he is the perfect man for the job. I never doubted he would be perfect casting, and I am so happy to be so consistently proven right again and again. Every episode, what a go! But even stepping back from that, just the character work employed here for both the Doctor and Ruby. Millie Gibson doesn't realistically have a lot to do in this episode, which is fine because we just had 73 yards. But in this scene, even not as the focus, she is killing it. And the Doctor. I think an important distinction to make, and I see a lot of people always misunderstanding this when talking about episodes, is that just because the Doctor says something does not necessarily mean that the writer agrees with it, or that the Doctor is even right. Even if not called out for what they're saying, the Doctor can be wrong, can be intended to be wrong, can be intended to be right, or can be intended to be right in a way human beings can't even conceptualize and see maybe as wrong. Maybe even the writer. When the Doctor says, I don't care what you think, that isn't what Russell T Davies is saying about himself. He might agree, he might disagree. Maybe, we don't know. Just because a writer makes a character say something or do something, that does not inherently mean that they themselves agree with it. But it is the sign of a really skilled writer to understand the character of the Doctor so much that as a being who's lived for thousands of years, to show that these unintellectual squabbles are below him, and that his kindness, his heart is so vast, his generosity so boundless, that he is willing to completely put that aside because he views all life as precious. That is the Doctor, that is the character of the Doctor. But in the end, it doesn't matter. His character is moot. He has been reduced down to nothing, and he is powerless. Not because he is actually powerless, but because these people are so blinded, so trapped in their own bubble. They outright refuse his help. It is an excellent showcase in the absurdities of bigotry, cutting straight to the core and proving why it is false. This episode is no lecture, as I have heard it being called by a tiny number of people. This episode is not even hand-holdy. It is mature and respectful enough of its audience for them to understand fully everything that it's putting down. And that's why I like it. That's why I appreciate it. Even now, even after saying all that, I feel like I'm doing this episode a disservice. All of that was fairly surface level. I'm saying all this stuff off the dome without a script, so whenever I go back and edit it, I know because this happens every time, I'm gonna be re-listening to what I say and wish I had said more, wish I had gone into more depth, because the more you talk about these things and think about them, the more you understand them and the more you're able to keep talking about them. There is so much here. So much I I didn't even touch on, which hopefully I'll be able to as I look into your comments. But before that, I want to talk about criticisms and my broader enjoyment of the series as a whole. I enjoyed the 60th anniversary specials, and as I already said, I was not particularly looking forward to this new series. Before the schedule was released, I was about on par as I was excitement-wise for Series 9 or Series 12, which are both good series, and I was excited at the time, just not that much, relatively. But then when the schedule dropped, I actually was straight up just not looking forward to it, because staying up till 9 in the morning working on videos, waking up at 1 PM and then working till 9 in the morning again on my weekends isn't a fun schedule. But then the episodes released, and I just could not lie. They were good. They were great. Every episode so far has been great. For some reason, there are people out there who want to pretend that Space Babies is a bad episode, and whenever I ask why, I never get like a real tangible answer. It's always something like, the babies' mouths look weird, and yeah, they do look a little weird, but it's still a good episode. Everything about it, structurally, plot-wise, character-wise, hell, even vibe-wise, is all good. It's a good episode. And then you get onto the Devil's Cord, and holy hell, the more I rewatch this one, the more it creeps up my list as maybe favorite of the season. Boom is obviously amazing, as is 73 Yards, and now this episode too. But as I said before, this series is not without its critics and its criticisms, so I think I should finally talk about why they don't bother me. Why the stuff that people say, which I make perfectly clear as much as I can, isn't motivated by any ill will or bias or incorrect things to say or even invalid criticism. I want to explain why that stuff doesn't bother me. For me, something which I value highly in the entertainment media that I consume is the emotion that it evokes within me. And I don't think I'm alone in this. Most people, consciously or not, are the same way. Not many people are objective critics. In fact, probably no one is an objective critic. So I am willing to look past small details in service of grander enjoyment. The biggest example of something like this that I can think of, and probably the most famous, is 1977's Star Wars. Probably haven't heard of it. Anyway, in this scene where Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi approach Han Solo and Chewbacca, Han Solo brags about how the Millennium Falcon made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. This, of course, is an error. Parsecs are distance, not time. Now, we can deep dive and say Obi-Wan gives this apprehensive look as if to say, this guy's full of shit. And maybe there has been a couple retcons which can find a way for this line to make sense after the fact. But, if we're being honest here, it is an error. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of the film at all. You could point it out to me, you could even be right, and I would not care. I would still love the movie. I would still hold it as one of my favorite films of all time, because at the end of the day, to me, that is insignificant. It doesn't matter. It may as well have not even been said. But that's just a small thing. What about a real issue? I hear people saying. What about if there was a word or phrase that everyone in the movie kept changing the pronunciation of for no reason?
Han Solo.
Han, get up here.
No one's giving hand to this.
What about Han?
Han.
After what you did to Han?
Han.
We're trying to save Han.
We'll find Han. Hi, Han.
Oh. And guess what? I still don't care. Doesn't matter to me. Tell me I'm not alone here, folks. Someone could say that to you and you could acknowledge, well, sure, I can see how that could maybe bother someone. And then you just forget about it because it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. Now, to some people, it does matter. And those people aren't wrong. Technically, they're right. And trust me when I say, I have been there. I understand it. The death by 1,000 cuts mentality. Sometimes things can just bother us. My most unpopular opinion on the whole channel is that I think Blink is just good. I think it's a 7 out of 10. Still good. And the reason is because there's a bunch of little things in it that bother me every time I watch. Like the Weeping Angels staring at their own reflection, or David Tennant reacting to an autocue like he's actually speaking to someone. From his perspective, it should just look like this. He's doing too much. But of course, I can recognize why they made that decision. Not only is it in the Doctor's quirky nature, but also it allows for more engaging and expressive television. You see, I can recognize that. But every time I watch those scenes, there's always that, that tiny little nagging voice in the back of my head saying, why is he talking like that? And it's also subjective things. The Weeping Angels are brilliant monsters, a brilliant creation, brought to life wonderfully and are conceptually genius. But if you look at Blink, everyone who goes back in time meets someone nice and has a wonderful life. Again, I recognize the conceptual horror of losing your whole life, all your potential, and getting sent back in time to an unknown period, unknown place, and have to just pick up the pieces. I recognize that that is a scary, brilliant, good idea. But also, subjectively, this is just a me thing. But sometimes I have fantasies, you know, daydreams, where I'm in the shower and such, and I wake up and I'm back in time. Whether that be the 90s or the Victorian times, or maybe even just like 2019 pre-pandemic. And I wake up in like my past self's body, and I walk around, see what stuff used to look like. I have to convince people that I'm from the future. I don't know, just something I think about. It's not that deep to me. Yeah, it'd be scary to be sent back in time, but it'd also be exciting and thrilling. But I also recognize that those things are incredibly subjective to me. And I would assume that most people's reactions to hearing me list off all that stuff would be my reaction to hearing someone say parsec isn't a measurement of time, which is, I can understand how maybe that could bother you, but I don't care. But keep in mind, all of these things only affect my enjoyment of the episode slightly. Not much. I still think it's good. I think it's a good episode, but I'm not too big of a fan of Sally Sparrow and Larry Nightingale. I'm not freaked out by any of the Angel stuff. I think there are problems in the technical of how it all works. I just got a few problems with the episode, even if realistically, none of them are that big a deal. So you see, I get it. I get where you guys are coming from when you talk about the new season and you say stuff like, why did the dots not kill them instantly? Why did the bogeyman not instantly die when exposed to space? If music is barred, why are there still people making music in EMI studios decades later in the Devil's Chord? Yeah, all of these questions have technical answers and can be explained with stuff in the story, but also they are technically problems and stuff which people have a problem with, but just not me. I don't. I am lucky enough not to care about all those little things and be able to enjoy the bigger picture, because goddamn, in my opinion, it really is an enjoyable bigger picture. Again, it's subjective. For example, The Caretaker from Series 8. Realistically, this is a slightly mediocre episode of the mid-series with a great performance from all its lead cast and some funny humour moments scattered throughout.
And you.
Now get lost.
But to me, due to personal things I don't want to talk about on the channel, I just can't stand it. Really not my type of episode. Now, of course, I can kind of put that aside to criticize the dynamics of it. I genuinely think don't work very well. Namely, the forced drama between the Doctor, Danny and Clara that just leads to an unpleasant viewing experience when they very easily could have sorted all their problems out if they acted like mature adults. And I could also talk about the positives of the admittedly very funny moments littered throughout the episode. But when I watch that episode, I just don't like it. For reasons personal to me. And that's fair, man. I think reasons for liking and disliking stuff that may come off as trivial are always fair. The main point that I'm trying to get at, as we will see as we get into the comments, is that all of these little things, these little issues, they bounce off me, man. They don't bother me at all. I care more about the big stuff, the themes of the work, the execution, everything more like that, rather than getting stuck and caught on every tiny detail for the CinemaSins counter. So that's why I like it, and that's why I don't not like it. Do you get what I mean? I feel like I've rambled on uber long here, but it's what we're all here for, am I right? This episode really got me going. I'm thinking of maybe raising its rating to an 8. Maybe even a 9, to be honest. But anyway, with all that aside, let's move on to your guys' thoughts, your comments. I've collected a million here today across a bunch of different opinions. I can't wait to hear them all. So let's just dive right in. Okay, so here we are with the comments. I have selected as many as I possibly can from both the video and the poll. I have selected many from each. As always, I tried to collect every comment, but this time round there were just so many, guys. I apologize if I couldn't fit yours in. I will definitely try to fit more in next time, but with that all said, let's read the first comment from Space. This is one of the first episodes in ages where I immediately rewound the episode and watched it again after my first watch. Reminds me of when I used to make my mum repeat the plots of episodes to me after we watched them before iPlayer. So yeah, sign of a great episode. And as the day has gone on, I'm starting to feel more haunted by the episode, remembering the look that Doctor and Libby? the racist, gave each other at the end. Absolutely chilling. Both Callie Cook and Ncuti Gatwa gave outstanding performances this episode, made me feel things. On my rewatch, I noticed all the tiny details Callie Cook put in, the tiny eye movements, the clumsy walking, the way her face changes every time the Doctor shows up. Obviously hate her character, but what a performance. And Ncuti, oh my god. They gave him like 3 minutes at the end to act his heart out, and he did. Almost brought me to tears. My only complaint is that I worry the racism suddenly became a bit too cartoonish at the end, but maybe that was intentional, to show the viewers that ultimately that's what racism boils down to, and that's how dumb racists look. And they were just building up to it with small comments throughout the episodes, like when she said, "I thought you just looked the same." Apart from that, I thought the visuals were great, the costumes and the hair and the sets 10 out of 10. All the outdoor scenes looked like they were shot on some British new build estate, probably were, which actually made it feel even more terrifying to me, as those places are so common and already freak me out. The way it contrasted with the colourful and modern interiors was cool as well, like they never bothered to make the outsides look as nice because they knew no one would ever see them. The only little mystery left to me was when Ricky, Rip King, mentioned the great abrogation. Abrogation means abolition for context. I wonder what that was in reference to, and it will never be mentioned again. Solid A tier episode though. The season is turning out banger after banger. This was the episode I was least excited for. Definitely agree. I mean, I think I agree with all of that. Great comment as always, my friend. Here's one from Tom who says, "Oh my sweet lord, that was good." I was really preparing myself for a mid-episode at best. I was thinking it looks like it's going to be a bit cringe, and Rusty Davies ranting about the kids these days and their phones and TikToks, but god damn, I loved it. This episode had me laugh out loud multiple times. Usually I'm an emotional stone. Funny moments do well to get a little snort out of me, but this episode was just hilarious. My particular favourite was when this says, "This is turning out to be the best day ever," and the goat Ricky September says, "People are still dying," and she's like, "Oh yeah, ah well." So good. I love that moment too. And yeah, the commentary was absolutely spot on. It was no way condescending or out of touch, it was just perfect. By this point in the episode, I was like, okay, this is epic, certified quirky banger, etc. And then the bomb drops at the end, where you're already like, hey man, fuck this girl, she killed fan favorite Ricky September, and then you realize that she and everyone else in the society is racist to the point where they don't even want to look at the Doctor. Oh my god, fuck these guys. It made me feel stupid as well, because it was the only point where I realized the entire cast apart from Ncuti was white. I'm at a loss for words. How do they keep making banger after banger? Also, congrats on 16k Chief. There's no one out there doing it quite like DW Fan 91. Thank you so much for the kind words. I think most people wouldn't really notice that the whole cast is white, but I must confess I did notice because I was analyzing all of the teasers ahead of time, right? So when I was watching all of that stuff, I came to the conclusion before I'd even watched the episode. But keep in mind, that's not what most people are going to be like. Most people are going to watch the episode, they might have seen the Next Time trailer, and that's basically it. So yeah, definitely great episode, definitely agree with the comment. Dot and Bubble. Wow. Genuinely one of the best surprises I've gotten from Doctor Who. Amazing episode. Coming from an episode I didn't have high hopes for. Surprisingly, I thought this maybe would have been a 6 out of 10, but oh my god. The way the bubble was used as a concept of the dangers of ignorance whilst having the figurative bubble that the Fine Time residents keep themselves in, leading to the sealed fates at the end of the episode, is such an astounding piece of writing. Our protagonist for the episode turning out to be such a selfish and ignorant as most of the other privileged residents created such a discomforting experience. Watching is an achievement in story, especially for Doctor Who. And oh my god, and Ncuti Gatwa's performance, his frustration, his manic laughter after seeing clearly how these people's ignorance is what's going to lead their deaths is so well communicated with his fantastic performance. What an actor. This episode is a genuine, lovely surprise and is clearly showing me that this season is going to be one of the best seasons of New Who. 9 out of 10, even if it's not the twin dilemma. Yep, that's a W. And here's one from the King, Kyle Reese, one of the best in the comment section. You guys already know. I think we're complete opposites with this episode. The only parts I found funny were the parts that the Doctor and Ruby were in. All the others that popped up I found really cringy, and it just took me out of it. Also, when the Doctor and Ruby weren't on screen, it just took me out. I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed by this episode, and Ncuti and Millie were amazing throughout, especially Ncuti at the end. He was incredible, but overall I was kind of disappointed. Maybe I need a rewatch, I don't know, but right now I'd give it a 6 out of 10. I completely understand that. I mean, at a certain point, you can only stand these intentionally insufferable characters so much. JLB who says, Dot and Bubble, a story 14 years in the making. I had no idea what to expect, but I had a lot of fun. I I was expecting the protagonist to become a fan favorite hero, and boy was I wrong. She's a terrible person, and I love how it went against expectations. Throughout the story, I thought her dismissing the Doctor was iffy, but at the end she fully manifested her vile personality. Love September, he's companion levels of good, the only decent person in Fine Time. I enjoyed this, and I feel every episode has been top tier, so it's really tricky to rank them. I'll try. Number 1, Boom. Gatwa's performance is so magical. 2, The Devil's Chord. 3, The Church on Ruby Road. 4, 73 Yards. 5, Dot and Bubble. And 6, Space Babies. The fact I said Dot and Bubble is top tier and is ranked 5th shows how amazing this season is so far. Wow, that is right. I mean, for me, I don't know if I'll be able to rank them. I think this is a good ranking, the one that you have, but I don't know if I'd agree because I love 73 Yards so much. But at the same time, I wouldn't even be able to make a list. Well, originally I was going to respond to this comment with a list of my own, but I can't think of one. So I'm going to have to move on. I definitely agree with your comment though, and I'm glad too. I kind of thought that they were going to try and make Lindy a beloved character, and even from the trailers alone, I was like, nah, bruh. So I'm glad that they leant into the opposite direction. Benjamin McAllister says, holy, what a great episode. Only episode I'd say is better at dealing with race in the show is Human Nature / Family of Blood. I think that's perfectly fair. Honestly, in a weird way, almost prefer it to 73 Yards, purely because there's genuinely like nothing to critique. When I saw the Next Time trailer and knew what it was vaguely about, I kind of thought it'd be fun but mid, and slightly annoying boomerish critique of tech, but honestly, the commentary was surprisingly well done, purely because it lent into the absurdity of how reliant on tech we are, and it didn't take itself too seriously, until the end of course. I don't understand Rusty Davies. Sometimes he writes commentary like in The Star Beast, sometimes he writes this. Mad genius. Also, one of the few episodes this season where the Doctor felt really doctory, if that makes sense, purely because a lot of the season seems to be about taking power away from the Doctor and seeing him react in ways we haven't seen him before, which I like, but this was a nice change of pace. His reaction at the last scene was such good acting, holy shit. And Shooting Out may be in my top 3 by the end of his era, honestly. Also, the return of the long song motif in the music, I don't know why Marigold did that, but oh my god, it was beautiful. My headcanon is that the space races from Rosa was from this civilization. That's actually a really good call. Also, my girlfriend told me a theory that she half jokingly said, which I cannot get out of my head no matter how I try. What if Susan Twist is the Master? At first I completely shrugged it off, and then I thought about it for a second, and honestly, the Master's done crazier stuff, so who knows? I kind of respect it if she was. Anyway, 9 out of 10, great episode. Love that they keep experimenting with the format, style, and tone. It's so good. Great comment. There's also a lot to discuss here in the comment. I think Human Nature and the Family of Blood deal with a lot of things in a very mature way. I mean, no surprises there, right? Who would have guessed that that story is a banger? But I think when it comes to tackling racism specifically, I think this story, because that's its whole purpose, I would give the crown to that story, and then I would say Rosa is in second place. I know a lot of people like to pretend Rosa does a bad job. I think that's just laughable on the face of it. We all know it does a good job. We can nitpick, we can say, actually, blah, 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 blah. You're only saying that because it's a Chibnall era episode. But also, Ben mentions here that there's a difference in commentary style between this episode and The Star Beast. And I think that there is, even if the underlying method is the same. In that I think Rose Noble, as I mentioned earlier in the video, her transgenderism is very key to the whole story, not just in like the actual plot beats, but also in the key themes of the whole story, of Beep the Meep, of that whole scenario. I can't really think of a synonym, it's lay people. But I will say the execution is so off in The Star Beast, especially the ending. There's so many eye roll worthy lines, so many just cringe inducing moments that go against even the idea that he's trying to portray. It just, yeah, I think it came from a good place, and I think it's executed well for about 60% of it, maybe 70% of it in The Star Beast, and then there are just like a few key lines which let it down. I think, especially towards the ending. I think basically every problem with The Star Beast isn't a fundamental one. I don't think there's a fundamental flaw with that story. I think all of the ingredients are there for a brilliant episode. It's just too short. I think that's the problem with it. If it was 90 minutes, it'd be perfect. Too much in too little time. However, this episode I think strikes a perfect balance between tackling a bunch of issues but also not trying to overstuff the story. It remains laser focused the entire time, whilst also never forgetting to be exciting, thrilling, intense, and a range of other emotions that are key to an exhilarating and entertaining piece of media. I tell a lie. Not every piece of media needs to be exciting or tense or blah blah blah. I also like the theory that frasco comes from this place or from Homeworld. I think that's funny. And on the music at the end, Jesus Christ, that soundtrack is absolutely incredible. And just him from the Discord server pointed this out to me, as Ben says that the long song motif is in the final composition. I don't really know what to call it. 15th Doctor theme epic remix. What do you call it? Music fanatics, let me know in the comments below. But anyway, just him pointed out to me. Of course I recognized the song, but he pointed out the meaning behind the song was that it directly contrasts how in The Rings of Akaton, the Doctor's speech, and more specifically Clara's leaf, does the job, but here, no matter what the Doctor says, it's just gonna flop. And on your final point about Susan Twist being the master, I must confess I have fallen quite firmly in the camp, and I have since those original trailers teasers came out. S-Triad, TARDIS. I think Susan Twist is either a Time Lord figure or a TARDIS figure, and I think the same for Mrs. Flood as well. I think that S-Triad thing is too on the nose. If it isn't related to TARDIS somehow, that's just a hell of a coincidence. But I like the master theory, I think that's cool. Rouge Argentine says, I loved Dot and Bubble, even if I found it a bit predictable. Not the ending, not the backstabby protagonist, but I knew the people from the home planet were dead, like, from the get-go. And I realised that the episode was touching on racism as soon as Ricky September said, they are sparing us, and I don't know why. Both blue-eyed blondes, like most of these thugs were sparing. And that ending, man. And the guy said to the protagonist, come, you'll contaminate. Damn, I feel like that part not only touched on racism, but also on migration and the fear of replacement theory. People will hold extremely harmful ideas just for the hell of it. No logic, no reason, just excuses to continue on being righteous on the damage they do to others. Congrats for the 15k, by the way, you absolutely deserve it. Thank you so much, as always. Now, I don't want to get political, folks. Political alert, but I feel like the only times I get political when talking about Doctor Who are when talking about Peter Harness episodes. And Peter Harness is coming from the right place, don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against him as a writer. Just so happens that both of his episodes are the worst political allegory in the history of Doctor Who. Like, I don't really know how you mess it up that badly. But then again, maybe I'm reading too much into it, because Peter Harness said that Kill the Moon isn't about abortion. Whatever you say, fella. There is actually a full conversation that one can have about that. Like, that could be a whole video, you know. Is it? Is it not? But it could be a really interesting video if I wanted to touch on that, which I wouldn't because it's not fun. But on your comment, when you talked about people feeling righteous, it isn't just limited to political discussion. There are so many people who they can't just stand disagreeing or not liking. They've got to feel greater than. They've got to feel morally superior, and they've got to pull whatever reason out of their ass that they dislike something for the right reasons, in quotation marks, for the right morals, because they're better. And if you disagree, then you are morally bad. And you see this all the time with like basically fucking everything, man. I saw a post where someone said, I watched The Rise of Skywalker with my son who's like 4 and we liked it. And someone responded to them calling them out for toxic positivity. Stop throwing around these buzzwords, man, just to feel righteous, just to feel like you're morally better. And these types of people always got to come up with reasons. It can't just be, oh, I didn't like it. It's got to be, it's morally bad and repugnant. 9 times out of 10, it really ain't that deep. Anyway, great comment. Every time I've watched this ep, the Doctor swearing to the sky stands out to me. Like, I don't think it's important, trademark, but reminds me of all of the boundary/edge of existence stuff. Also, literally every ep so far has featured absent/dead parents. Ruby's mum in Ruby Road, the Space Baby's parents, Toymaker being taken from Maestro, Maestro being taken away from Henry, the dad in Boom, Ruby's mum and grandma in 73 Yards, and then the Homeworld parents this episode. I don't really know what that could mean, but it could mean something. Colin Savage says, I honestly wasn't expecting it to be anything crazy, but goddamn, this episode was great. I see the vision, Russell T Davies. Me too, brother. And here's a great one from Manny Bachelor. I felt so bad in the last video, I actually had to cut his comment for time. It's like that meme, you know that meme where I had to cut the comment out? I felt so terrible. Anyway, but he's back and he says, nah, this season proper elite, man. and contender for top 3 of New Who. They can't keep getting away with this. I really enjoyed this episode. I had full faith that I would. I love the uniqueness of the episode. The social commentary was right there, chilling right in front of me, but I didn't mind. In fact, I liked it. Parts almost reminded me of Bad Wolf, something to do with overly bright aesthetic and campness, but also the critique on technology and morbid undertones. I was completely sucked into this world for 45 minutes, and although the protagonist was a twat, I honestly wanted her to be gobbled up by one of the creatures. It was actually quite gripping. And no way Darlin went and exterminate my main man, Ricky September. Bloody oath, I was livid, dickhead. And I love the realization of them knowing Susan Twist. Them being absolutely dumbfounded was hilarious. They're just like the audience for real, but oh man, that last scene, absolutely shattering. And Ncuti Gatwa, you incredible man. Wow, I was mesmerized. I am loving his incarnations so much. Every time he is on screen, he absolutely glows. What a Doctor Who. I do see what you mean with the Bad Wolf parallels. He means the episode, by the way, not the story arc. Personally, I don't want to compare it to that episode because I do think that is the best Russell T Davies story he has ever written. I don't know if he can even do better. It's a perfect storm of a story. That and Dalek specifically are the best of New Who in my opinion, and I don't really see anything else coming close to it unless they perform a miracle. But I do definitely see the similarities, and that scene where they recognize Susan Twist is so amazing. I'm also glad that 73 Yards is getting references as the season progresses, although maybe that is to spite those imbeciles who said that the episode was pointless. Just kidding, I don't think you're stupid if you didn't like 73 Yards. I just personally really liked it. Also, maybe this is a hot take, I don't really know. I'm starting to really like the Sonic Screwdriver now. I did not like it when it was first announced. I mean, I didn't really like the 14th Doctor Sonic Screwdriver either. That one also grew on me though. I think that was pretty cool. But yeah, I definitely raised an eyebrow when the Click Sonic Screwdriver was first announced. But I can safely say now, after this episode, I think it's pretty cool. Cool sound effect, cool look. I think maybe the television remote works more when you're pointing it at a screen. And also, if you look at what it's doing in the preview to the next episode, Rogue, where it's doing like a sonar thing. I don't know, I thought that was really cool. It's getting to the point where I'm beginning to love literally everything about this season, guys. I really liked this episode. I was unsure if I would or not after watching last week's Next Time preview. It didn't seem that interesting to me. I always give episodes a chance though, because this happens. I thought it was so interesting, the storytelling of an unlikable protagonist, the horror in sentient AI, and yet the comedy, giant slugs eating people. This was yet again a very impressive move by Russell T Davies. This season has been non-stop for me, and I am enjoying every second. Definitely agree. I personally think that the slugs were very funny. I mean, there is just a morbid humor in the irony of these people literally walking around. They walk straight into a slug and get eaten. I mean, fucking Gothic Pool, bruv. Gothic Pool. He's like walking forward, he's like, haha, Lindy, you're so silly. There aren't any giant slugs. You gotta imagine when he was writing that, he had a big fat ass grin on his face, the goofy goober. I would too. Funny ass scene. Christian says, I think they did a good job towing the line on making Lindy annoying and bratty, but not too much that it takes away from the episode. Right up until Lindy betrayed Ricky, I was sympathetic for her because I figured that spending a prolonged time in Fine Time had basically just turned her into an iPad kid that was flawed but innocent. I passed off most of the things she said as coming from her being in a state of distress and her overall childish nature, which I think made the ending all the more impactful for me. Definitely agree. I've watched Dot and Bubble twice now, and the only thing that I was kind of iffy on was the racism part of the final twist. I just didn't feel like it was set up enough to feel natural. But after watching your video and putting some thought to it, that is because this episode covers it so expertly that it feels out of place compared to the other forms of media. I think that is kind of true. Like you mentioned in the video, it can be satisfying to just have the punch the racist moment, and I think the lack of that caught me off guard at first, but now I really appreciate that's not how it played out. I feel like a lot of the time racist characters in shows and movies, at least the ones I've watched, shout their hatred from the rooftops every chance they get with no real nuance to create that moment where the show/movie can point and be like, racism bad. Having had time to think about it over a few hours now, I really appreciate how they handled it. I'm having trouble putting it exactly into words, but I think that having an engaging antagonistic force that is not racism makes the racism aspect even stronger. Again, I'm struggling to find the words, but it's sort of more like a less is more type deal in my eyes. They never had the Fine Time characters get up during the middle of the episode and give a heavy-handed hate speech. They just created believable characters and let the episode speak for itself. I think it was also a genius idea to have the full reveal before the Doctor saves the day. caring for and saving people is what the Doctor does. So to have Lindy turn him away over something so small-minded must be heartbreaking. Incredible episode, not 73 yards level in my opinion, but still in the same ballpark. 8 or 9 out of 10, depending on my mood. Rip Ricky the GOAT. This is a really incredible comment and says a lot of things which I was also feeling. Part of the reason why I respect and appreciate the handling of racism so much in this episode is because I think a lot of other forms of media have been doing a real disservice to the idea and kind of making a mockery of it by playing it in such a cartoonish, hammy way, when in real life there are monsters in the real world, people, and at some point you kind of have to wake up and realize that a lot of bigotry in the modern day is hidden behind smoke and mirrors. And yes, having those stories where the racist gets punched are all very good, all very well and good. People can make stories however they want, but also where I'm at personally with my taste now, I think an episode like this with a message like this and an execution like this is far more important and valuable. But I'm not the story police. I think you can do it both ways and it can be good. Casual Log says this episode was very good. I was worried at first because the acting of the other people in Fine Time was really goofy, but I'm now realizing that's probably the point. Once I finished this episode the first time, I was just really confused and didn't catch the whole racism bit, but on rewatch it's pretty obvious, and Ncuti at the end is on a whole other level. I feel like I was also worried it would fall into the realm of phone bad type commentary, but there are so many layers, losing your sense of morality, prejudice, selfishness, and humanity's future as a whole. The season has been so goddamn good, and I really look forward to the next couple episodes. Me too, it looks so good. And yeah, you're definitely right, there are just so many layers here. I saw a lot of people not have faith in Russ T Davies, and I can kind of understand why, from the trailers and also just from his previous handling of social issues. But for me, I never lost faith. I didn't think that this episode was ever going to be bad because of anti-phone messaging. This may sound ironic from someone who is a YouTuber and spends hours of their week staring directly at a screen to edit their videos, but I do think that excess screen time can be dangerous, and especially apps like TikTok and Twitter are genuinely damaging to, I don't want to say society as a whole, that feels hyperbolic, but to the mental health of some people in the younger generations. I feel like that's just inarguable. So I wouldn't necessarily have a problem if they did go that direction, but they didn't, and they went a much more interesting direction whilst also touching on all of that stuff, which I feel is fine to touch on. Overall, I knew Russ T Davies wouldn't let us down, and he came through. He came in clutch. I really enjoyed this episode. It was really fun, but then the shift after she portrayed Ricky made it a great episode for me. I'm curious if we'll see any of this group again. Edits absolutely agree about the rewatchability of the season, and especially this episode. I have the season downloaded on my phone to watch/listen to while I work all day. Yeah, I really love rewatching Doctor Who. I was not actually planning on getting the box set of season 1 at the end because I don't know if you guys knew about this. There was a small controversy. It costs so much money. And big fella, I am broke. But hopefully the standard edition will go down to a more reasonable price, like £20, £14, £9. That's probably a fairy tale dreamland, but I do want to pick it up because I like watching stuff on my telly. Jim Hearn says, I thought Ricky was going to be the Doctor with some kind of hologram over him in order to get through to her. He had a bunch of quirk and compassion. When I found out he was just that cool, it was too late. Rip Ricky. Rest in peace, Ricky September. Yeah, I really like the character. I thought it was good to have a good person in the episode. I know there's some theorizing between people. There was a comment from Scumner, which I saw. I was trying to find it to put in the video. I couldn't find your comment, man. I'm sorry. It must have either been auto-deleted by YouTube or you deleted it yourself. But he posed the question, do we think that Ricky September was just as terrible as everyone but was just hiding it? I personally lead to the side that he was actually pretty good. I mean, he showed no hesitation to doing as the Doctor said. He seemed to be flattered by his compliments towards him. And although he is also, you know, he's also a little bit dense too. He's also a bit stupid. That just comes with living in the society. The actor who played him, Thomas Rhys Harries, I think it's called. Definite great job, although I don't think he was 27. He looked more 32. I definitely see why some people thought that it was going to be the Doctor. I personally never did, but I remember seeing after the episode came out, a lot of people were like, oh, I thought Ricky September was going to be the Doctor, because I think the key moment that does that is when he says, look at me, don't look at that, look at me. That to me is something that the Doctor would say, and I feel like a lot of people realize that, but it just shows how caring he is. Yes, he's a bit dumb and doesn't really know how things work, doesn't have much practical experience. He's only read about things. But at least he's trying, you know? Mr. Showoff says, I love that ending. We all thought it was going to be one way, but then turning out to be just the worst. And not being redeemable was a cherry on top. I really like that touch. This season continues to be strong episode after strong episode. I know people hate on Space Babies, but I really think that episode brought the heart back to Doctor Who about trying to save everyone. This episode continues it. Even though Lindy is awful, the Doctor and Ruby still go out of their way trying to help her. I felt like Space Babies was great. I mean, I think that moment at the end where he goes into the airlock is really heroic, and just the energy of the whole episode is so vibrant. The production design is incredible. I know people didn't like the Bogeyman, but people didn't like the Slitheen when they came out either. It will just take some time for people to appreciate the greatness. My only problem with Space Babies is that the first minute of the episode is an exposition dump and the Doctor almost swears. Those are my only two problems. Outside of that, it's just a good episode. In fact, I'm gonna rewatch it right after filming this. Why not? I honestly hated this episode initially until some mutuals on Twitter changed my perspective on it, and not gonna lie, it's actually kind of genius. Like, Lindy was confirmed with privileged white friends in a privileged white society in a literal chamber dome. The episode, I only now realize thanks to some mutuals on Twitter, was not about social media / technology, but rather the dangers of echo chambers and how it creates a rise in intolerance and bigotry. Ironically, I think Twitter is an echo chamber. I do think it's interesting seeing how other people can watch an episode and come to different conclusions. To me, so I of course record all of my reactions to the latest episodes, I was rewatching my reaction to this episode and I was about to say I caught it instantly, but to me it wasn't even something that you would like catch. To me it just felt like the text of the episode, you know what I mean? And so it was a little weird of me to then go into other people's comment sections and people saying stuff like, nope, it's not racism, blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I think it's pretty sure it's racism. But then again, man, that's not how some people think. Some people just think different ways, and that's perfectly fine. I watched The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and I think, wow, what a good episode. Then other people watch it and they think that alien pod looks too much like an alien pod or something. Insert reason why people don't like that episode in here. I don't know. Okay guys, so what are we saying? W or L on the Making a Business Twitter account? You think that would work? You think that would help me get a sponsor? It's getting rough out here, people. It's looking to be a cold summer. I kid. Let's move on to the next comment. Robbie Martin says, it's sad that a lot of people aren't enjoying this season. It feels like being during the Capaldi era again. Tom replies to this saying, it'll feel more like the Capaldi era in 5 years when everyone goes, oh wait, this was amazing. Guys, I swear I always liked this era and was never a hater. So fucking true. Oh my god, the Capaldi turnaround has been so crazy. I've been saying this for years, but no one's been listening to me. Yes, even beloved Heaven Sent, frequently called the best episode of Doctor Who, which it isn't. It does have a few issues, but it's like a solid 9 or 10 out of 10 episode, right? Like really goddamn good. And yet there were people at the time who were hating on it, and you will see this again with this series, I know for sure. Space Babies and The Devil's Cord were released to the worst reception Doctor Who has ever been released to, the most hate I've ever seen for a Doctor Who episode, far eclipsed even The Timeless Child, and both of those episodes are straight up good. So you can imagine that as time goes on and as people get nostalgic for these episodes, they will begin to realize what I was saying the whole time, which is that they're pretty damn good. 73 Yards in particular will age as well as Heaven Sent will. I think those episodes genuinely are on the same level of quality. I mean, if I'm being real, I think this series puts basically all of Doctor Who for the past 14 years to shame. I think it far eclipses anything from Peter Capaldi, Jodie Whittaker, basically everything from The Fraud apart from Series 5, and almost everything from Rusty Davies 1 as well. And so with that said, I just can't even imagine how much the love for this series is going to grow exponentially as it goes further and further into the past. This series can be compared to a lot of things. Obviously, it can be compared to Series 1 with Christopher Eccleston. It can also be compared to Season 13 or Season 14 of the original show. But right now, in my head, where I'm at, let me know if you guys agree with me in the comments below. I'm getting a real Season 25 vibe from Series 14. Maybe that's just me, it's probably not intentional, but if I had to compare it to any other series of the show, that's where I'd be going with. Anyway, that's a really long-winded way of saying Heaven Sent good, this series good, it's gonna age really well. Majestic World 19 says they weren't kidding about that final scene being memorable. Crazy to think that was Ncuti Gatwa's first scene he filmed for the season. That is crazy, and he knocked it out of the park. Just Tim says this episode was so good. The way it comes off camp / silly, almost like scary movie levels, only to weave in microaggressions and the audio cues that create a whiplash at the twist ending perfection. Things as subtle as the protagonist betraying September right after the Doctor flirts with him, she's selfish, racist and homophobic, or the way the soundtrack during the scene with the boat and the Doctor's speech referencing scenes like in Rings of Akaton. So this is what he's saying. Of course he said it to me in DMs first, but here's what he's saying in the comment, where his speech is impassioned and convinced people only to be dismissed by the colour of his skin. Perfection. Not to mention his normal TARDIS introduction being flipped on its head to suddenly being unbelievable just because he's a person of colour. I was blown away. Amazing episode. Can't wait to rewatch it. And now we're moving over to the comments that were left on the poll. Here's one from Joey Underwood, another great creator. He says, the ending was amazing. The rest of the episode was good, so it will have to be somewhere in between for me. Jeanette says, to comment on something I haven't seen anyone talk about, the way Lindy can't walk properly without the dot and bubble is entirely believable. This is how the human nervous system works. Things that happen get wired together, like Pavlov's dogs, or all the movements you make to ride a bike. If you build that bike backwards, you will fall over hundreds of times until your nervous system adjusts all the moves it's associated with riding a bike. Then you get on a regular bike and you can't ride that. I think it's making a point that we think of social media as affecting our minds, our thoughts, creating distortions or limitations, but it affects us more pervasively, affecting our bodies through biology / hormones. I think first of dopamine here, our nervous system through cross-wiring and conditioning. This is all very true. Also, something to note, the residents of Find Time aren't human. They have weird skin and their blood is blue. I also think being blue-blooded is an intentional choice, which I think goes to show just how incredibly well directed these episodes have been. This one and 73 Yards especially. To the director of these two episodes, I know it was the same person and I know your first name is Dylan. Just incredible job, man. Oh my god, hats off to you. Bro came in and casually became one of, if not the best director in the modern show's history. Rachel Talalay and Jamie Magnus Stone are up there as well, as is Graham Harper. But to already be in the Hall of Fame and a contender for #1 after just 2 episodes, this guy is fucking amazing. And shout out to the director of Wild Blue Yonder as well. That guy was a G. Tom Lednor Music said, I'm interested to know if you only take comments from the community reaction from this video. I always leave mine in the community poll, so should I be putting them off or here instead? I take them from both. If you want a better chance of being included in the video, your best bet is probably just posting in both. But forget you heard me say that. I'm echoing the words of my friend as I thought exactly the same as him. I liked the episode a lot, then I saw the ending and I loved it. And Ncuti really is heckin' fantastic. I remember wondering if I'll ever be able to see the guy from Sex Education as a Doctor, but now I watch Sex Education, it's the same actor, but don't notice. Ncuti is such a famous actor and is incredible as the Doctor. He's fast becoming my favourite and that's no easy job. I didn't think I'd be able to say that so early on. I definitely agree. I mean, I personally did not like Sex Education and I didn't really like Ncuti Gatwa in Sex Education either. And I have to say, he's becoming one of my favourite Doctors of the new series as well. For me, with New Who, my favourite Doctor very likely is the one whose episodes I watched last. My favourite is changing basically weekly at this point. And I'm happy to say that Ncuti Gatwa is very much so in the running for my favourite New Who Doctor. I don't think he's ever gonna beat my 2 GOATs, but he's certainly fucking incredible and just perfect for the role. But anyway, I think Ncuti Gatwa has done an incredible job at putting that character behind him and taking on the role of the Doctor fully 100%. This episode was a great commentary that I really enjoyed and laughed out loud at a lot of moments, like the legs hanging out of the monster in the office. As much as this episode was supposed to contain political messaging, it's very Rusty Davies in its use of comedy, like in Aliens of London / World War III. I love those episodes. The ending was absolutely golden and I love Ncuti's expression in the very last shot, almost wondering if it was worth it. I've never seen that look on the Doctor before and it showed a new side that I'm really interested in. The fact that he's still able to offer everyone sanctuary and saving them right after they discriminated against him is so of the character. Russell just gets it, man. 100% agree. I was a bit like you. I thought that Dot Bubble would be a bit of a step down because of the massive amounts of bangers we've had recently, but damn, this guy just doesn't miss. It was excellent. I went in with not low expectations, but expectations of an episode that was good, not great, great, and throughout that's what I thought, until the ending. Everything made sense. Wild Blue Yonder brought me to tears twice, once when the Doctor lost it on a piece of the wall, and a second time because I realised how back we were. I really haven't enjoyed Doctor Who for a very long time, so it gave me a great emotional reaction to see such good storytelling. Dot and Bubble gave me the same emotional response at the end. The racism was something I didn't see coming when it was staring me right in the face all along. No other black characters at all, and I didn't even notice. That's what the episode does so well. It's staring you right in the face and you don't even know it. The monsters are right next to you. Monsters everywhere, people. It's so easy to see something and not notice or not want to notice, and go back to the comfort of your bubble. What a perfect allegory. Perfect. I probably got a lot more to say, but I've only just watched the episode as I couldn't when it came out, so I might come back here and add or edit if I have time. Once again, spectacular episode and political commentary. Parzival the Stormtrooper 5017 says Susan Twist was acknowledged last week as well, when Ruby said she'd seen the hiker before. Now this was a mistake on my end because it was 1 or 2 in the morning and I misspoke, so this guy is completely right. In my initial video, my initial review, I said that Susan Twist hadn't been acknowledged before. What I meant to say was that 73 yards was getting acknowledged, because Susan Twist had been mentioned before in 73 yards in the previous episode. So anyway, this guy is completely 100% right and I was completely 100% wrong. My bad. And here's another one from Kevin. Absolute trash. I'm not really surprised. This guy hasn't liked anything so far. I'm just gonna go right in and say that the final scene is god awful. Everything about it made my skin crawl, from how performative the writing feels hiding behind the guise of social commentary when really it's a smokescreen to hide behind when the criticisms start coming in. Okay, so let's break it down. Fine, time is racist. Okay, I can see the thought process here, but my main question is, why? What leads to this? Because when you come from a multicultural country with many ethnicities in government, I can't fathom that in the future we'd end up in Rusty Davies' cynical world where YT has once again become the most evil and pampered race in the world, because only whites can be racist according to Rusty. I don't think that's what he's saying. Looking into this deeper than Rusty Davies when writing this dog shit script, there was little to no attempt to criticize echo chambers as a whole. Didn't even entertain the idea of an echo chamber. We don't know the politics of Fine Time, so when the last 5 minutes tries to make it a big deal, I honestly couldn't care, because as far as I'm aware, being rich and white is the only factors to being a massive bigot who can't even walk in a straight line without assistance. I feel like you're kind of being a little harsh here, man. Come on. Irritatingly enough, this is all I'm seeing people discuss when it comes to the episode. People are surprised I didn't see it coming. Of course you didn't, because Rusty Davies made no attempt to flesh it out beyond the basic, oh, you are not like us, so bad, because he didn't want anyone to guess the ending, or worse, think for themselves about a topic relevant. I feel like Rusty Davies has left a lot to think about. I feel like if the episode had been a bit more heavy-handed, you would criticize that for being heavy-handed and performative. Maybe you just don't like the idea of them tackling racism, which is fine. I mean, it's not going to be for everyone. But the signs were there the whole time, so it's not like he made no attempt to flesh it out. Russell T Davies is the type of guy to stage a fire in an orphanage just to save one child and claim how awful it is that people set fire to an orphanage. That's wild. Leaving out any details how the fire started in case people start questioning his motives. I feel like Rusty Davies is more the type of guy to write an episode of Doctor Who. That's what I personally feel like. I understand your point though, your deeper point, and I personally disagree. I don't think that he is that type of guy, because I don't think he's done anything hypocritical to that level in this season or this episode. The episode itself, now that I've gotten that use of subtext out of the way, was equally as trash. I feel like you can't really separate the episode from the subtext, at least not in this case. Another good premise wasted on pantomime script writing, forced current gen humour, and no fleshing out of the world or story. I'm honestly baffled at what happened between 2009 and now, because every script Russ Davies has hit out has been on the same level as End of Time Part 1 in terms of absolute embarrassment of being a fan of the show. I will agree, End of Time Part 1 is fucking god awful. Just dog shit, right? Like, that episode fucking stinks. But you compare like The Devil's Cord and 73 Yards, even like Wild Blue Yonder and The Giggle to End of Time Part 1, it's no comparison. They are way better. Not that that's difficult. I think 99.999% of Doctor Who episodes are better than the End of Time Part 1. He thinks his scripts are smarter than they actually are, trying to create bridges using straw. If the structure does manage to remain one person's weight is enough to make the whole facade crumble. I genuinely think I hate this season. I think you do too. I think probably. Just honestly dog shit writing that has made me wish I stopped watching the show years ago. I thought at least this episode would would hold up if I ignored the subtext, but then I just ended up hating on it for other reasons. The non-explanation for the rules of the world, cringy characters who I didn't want to follow, dialogue written by a TikToker, and then the ending just being such a tonal shift that jarring would be an understatement to describe the whiplash I experienced. Also, the Doctor is just a massive nonce. Just gonna drop that one at the end there? Please stop having the billions of years old flirting with questionably aged women and men, especially when you establish the planet is made up of mostly teens, 17 to 27 specifically, but I caught this subtext before the other one. Was not a good look to have the ancient alien flirt with a guy who could be potentially under 18. Ricky September is not fucking 17, bro. That guy is like 32. I can officially say I hate this new era. I was indifferent to Chibnall, but I hate this. I feel like me and this guy are like on opposite ends of the spectrum, you know what I mean? And I don't think he's wrong. He just has his own opinions and I disagree with them personally, and the ones that he left on the previous video talking about Boom. But I think people should be allowed to say that stuff, you know what I mean? And for the last comment of the video from Books Mean Anyway 235, what if Mummy is the mummy of the space babies? What if these guys are the babies, so Lindy doesn't have a real mummy and does not understand the concept of a family? That's why she seems to not care that much for her mother's death. She knows what they taught her. Maybe they are useful. What if Mummy is an AI? Or is not an actual AI, but another god? Maybe the bigger one. Good theory. And thanks for watching. What an incredible video. Thank you all, as always, for all of the comments. I tried to fit in as many as I could. Again, I felt kind of guilty because there were so many great comments that I just didn't have the time to manage to fit into this video. So don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And a special thanks to the members. And thank you to the king, Kyle Reese. And with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.